Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the next session of hashtag Three Pointers. And as you know, we invite a subject matter specialist and talk about their subject and field. Today, we have a very special guest, Dr. Tathagata Neogi. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you.
I'm sure he doesn't need any introduction right now. A lot of people I've spoken to have really appreciated him over the years, and that got me interested in his work. And I think perhaps it was last year that we actually connected, and thereafter I think, yes, it's going strong. But a small introduction to the people about him. For the people who don't know him yet, Dr. Tathagata Neogi is an archaeologist and ethnographer with a PhD from University of Exeter. He's also the co-founder of Heritage Walk Calcutta, an academic-run social enterprise offering historical walks in Kolkata, India. A very warm welcome once again.
Thank you very much.
But today, we are not going to talk about the heritage walks, but we are going to talk about archaeology. So, which is a very interesting field, but not many of us know a lot about it. It still is in a little dark for many of us. So, we wanted to ask a few questions. I have around 8 questions for you, difficult ones. I hope that's fine with you.
That's absolutely fine.
The first question is, you're aware of the dichotomy of choosing a profession in India, a career in India. So when and how did you decide that you wanted to be an archaeologist? And how does the training and the job differ from that of a historian?
Okay, so archaeology is, when we are kids, I was reading something a couple of days back. It was a survey in England where it says that about 70% of kids want to be archaeologists because they watch Discovery Channel, they watch movies like Indiana Jones and Lara Croft and all of that. So there is thrill in that. It looks like a detective work, which it is. But when you actually see that how many people are actually taking up archaeology as a career choice, the number goes down by about 99%. So probably only 1% of that 70% actually goes on to do an archaeology course and become an archaeologist. So the reason for that, I think, is because the lack of awareness about what you can do with an archaeology degree. And so when I started, my start was just like that, watching Discovery Channel, which was just coming up in India at that time. I was watching shows on ancient Egypt, tombs being excavated live on National Geographic Channel. Zahi Hawass was one of my favorites. That was, sorry?
Do you know by this you just gave away your age?
That's absolutely fine. It's not a problem at all. Well, it says that an archaeologist matures more as she or he ages because we look at more ancient stuff. Anyway, so we I got interested in that, and when I was in class 7 or 8, I just told my parents that I want to be an archaeologist, and very interestingly, my parents were okay with that. I thought that they will try to discourage me because all my other relatives were trying to discourage me because they said that you're not going to get a job. The only jobs that they're in the IT or in management, which was also then gradually picking up as a course, coveted course in India. But my parents were completely supportive, and so that's when I decided, and that's when I went to high school. After class 10, I chose humanities, which again, there's a very gendered way of looking at that in India because people say that that's something that women do. So again, there's a lot of backlash from my relatives, but my parents were super supportive. And then I did history in Jadavpur University, all of that because I wanted to do archaeology in the future. And doing history was just a first step to do that. And then I went and did archaeology in master's and PhD in England.
Okay.
So so archaeology and history, like going to the second question, archaeology and history
Mm,
is not that different. The only big difference is that you in archaeology you try to reconstruct or understand
mm-hmm,
the past based on material remains. So uh, remains of what you find in like potsherds or what or a figurine that you find in excavation,
mm,
or even the looking at the landscape and
mm,
trying to understand as how a certain site
mm,
or certain place is situated in connection to its entire landscape, its surrounding areas, and all of that. So
yeah.
it's more of practical work, more of going out there, uh, doing like spending hours and hours under the sun,
Mm,
um, to excavate and be patient and analyze and all of that. So that's depending on material remains is the key difference between history and archaeology.
mm-hmm,
But then the skill sets are very comparable because you need to be uh, analytical about
mm-hmm,
whatever you need to question whatever you find, and you need to basically have the same analytical skills to understand and contextualize whatever you find. So
mm-hmm,
historian does that through written records.
mm-hmm.
An archaeologist does that through mostly non-written human remains. So yeah, that's the basic difference.
So would you say they work parallelly? They have to go together to actually have an accurate record of history?
Um, you need to actually, I mean, archaeology and history has to go together.
Okay.
It cannot, they cannot go in isolation. And if you don't have that sense of history, um,
Yeah.
which is a key for a historian,
Mm-hmm,
if you don't understand how past really works or
mm-hmm,
how you can analyze the past in a
mm-hmm,
nuanced way, so
mm-hmm.
that sense of history is very important for an archaeologist as well.
Okay.
And so these skills are shareable and comparable. And
Mm-hmm,
the other difference between archaeology and history is that archaeology uses a lot more other disciplines. So archaeology cannot be just a standalone discipline. We need to use uh, geologists, we need to use geographers, we need to take the help of biologists and geneticists
yeah.
and
Mm,
chemists and even IT and all of that. So
yeah.
we'll be talking about that probably in next few questions. But so archaeology cannot stand alone, and history is just one of those I would say helpers, just to put it in a more accessible way, that helps archaeology to be complete.
Exactly. Okay. So tell us a little bit about the history of archaeology. When did it start and how did it evolve?
So this is very interesting because archaeology, if you look at the etymology of the word, it just means stories of the past or ancient history, or so it's a Greek Roman word, which
Uh,
uh, and it seems very simple, and it
mm,
basically does not, like, etymologically it is not that different from history.
mm,
um, and also we have a conception that archaeology has to do with only ancient stuff,
mm,
but there can be an archaeology of even modern times. We have World War archaeology, we have
yeah.
industrial archaeology, and all of that stuff as well.
Industrial archaeology.
So hmm?
Industrial archaeology.
Yeah, industrial archaeology is a big upcoming field
Uh-huh.
in archaeology.
Okay.
Um, so we can talk about that later.
Okay.
So in terms of how archaeology started, it originally started as that. It originally started as a physical remains of the ancestors of the past.
Mm-hmm.
And it started probably, like, modern archaeology started probably in the 17th century, where people, there was a craze about exploring the world around you, and as well as going on sea voyages and discovering new places, discovering in a very western sense new places that you did not know existed, and then going there and try and being awed by sites or like massive buildings, very impressive structures like the Taj Mahal. Uh, we have descriptions of the Taj Mahal from every western writer who happened to pass through Agra from the 16th, 17th centuries. So it started with these big sites, which were then analyzed and used as the remains of a glorious past. And also, it started with antiquarians went to some of these big sites, to Greek and Roman sites first in Europe, and then to Egypt, and then to Turkey, and then to India to start collecting artifacts, like impressive artifacts, like big statues, the Elgin marbles, for example, in the British Museum, the Kohinoor diamond, for example, that is in the Royal Collections. So all of these collecting very valuable, big remains of the past became associated with antiquarianism and archaeology. But gradually it starts changing in the 19th century and the 20th century, where archaeology becomes more like situating where these large sites are located and how they compare to the common people. So it came down from elite oriented discipline, and discipline that's focused on collecting things, to more about knowing how common people lived, and how a big site like Taj Mahal made sense in the context of the area, the entire area, the entire empire, and all of that stuff. So, and for India, there was a huge leap, like forward for archaeology, when Sir John Marshall was appointed as the head of archaeology, Director General of Archaeological Survey of India in 1902. Before that, archaeology was very underfunded, but Sir John Marshall actually brings in this holistic um, approach to archaeology, where you do minute, like scientific approach, and you do not really discard anything like as simple, or because every simple evidence that you find of the past can tell you another story. And that gets a huge leap um, we when the with the discovery of the Indus Valley civilization in 1921, where we don't have big monumental sites, but we have sprawling urban settlement with a much richer and much older Indian culture in the Indian subcontinent than you would have thought existed. So, and gradually archaeology has become even more focused on more mundane lives, and rather than, it's now going away from big monuments and trying to establish how people in general lived in the past. So that's, and we are also using a lot of like Archae has a very good connection with technological development. So we're using a lot of modern technology to try to provide this analytical lens about trying to learn as much as we can from the little bit of remain that we find as well. So I hope that makes sense.
There is so much development happening, so much has happened over the years. Uh, is there a specific skill set that you need to be an archaeologist today? Of course, I know even the skill set has changed over the past several years. I think past several
Mhm.
centuries. But what are the skills do we need now? As you mentioned about technology and all those things to become an archaeologist.
So it depends on what interests you in archaeology, like what kind of research you want to do. If you want to say be an ex, like if you're interested in archaeological excavation, be a traditional archaeologist, then the biggest skill set that you probably need is patience. Uh, it sounds very mundane, but it actually helps quite a lot. And also, you need to be able to have that sense of history. So having a history degree, going through a good history college before you do an archaeology for a master's or PhD helps quite a lot. But if you're again interested in, say, something like uh, biological archaeology, where you look at biological remains found in archaeological record and try to analyze them, then you definitely need to have a more biological, like background in biology and the life sciences, and then take up archaeology. If you want to be a specialist in landscape archaeology, which is one of my specializations, uh, which means that you want to study landscape, and you can do two things. You can either do that by doing surveys in the landscape, and by looking at the landscape, you can identify sites, or you can use more advanced technology like the what we call remote sensing, so GIS. Look at satellite data, and you can then try to find out, analyze the data to find out what happened in that landscape in the past. And it's possible with the current amount of the huge amount of satellite data that we are generating. So for that, you need more of a little bit of background in geography, understanding of how land formations work, and all of that, and also uh, a little bit of understanding of the technology as well that goes along with it. So it's no specific one type of skill set that you need. It depends on what really interests you in archaeology. If you're interested in forensic archaeology, for example, then you need some like definitely some medical based skill sets where you, for example, if you're excavating a site and which is related to Black Death in medieval Europe, and then you want to understand how plague had affected the population there and all of that and how it spread. That's the job of a forensic archaeologist, because they can look at the the remains, the human remains that are found, and they can basically analyze how people died and when people died, what age they died, and all of that. So if you want to do that, then you definitely need some medical background as well. So really depends on what you want to do in archaeology, and there are so many avenues that are available. It's not a homogeneous monolithic discipline anymore, and that's what is great about it, because it has so many skills that you can get come into it with, and that makes you employable as well in not just in archaeology but in several other things, other aspects, other careers as well.
Okay, so I have too many questions now, and one of a question coming up answer that you needed. So, can a medical student who's just completing his MD thereafter try to become forensic archaeologist?
Yes, they can if they have a sense of history. So that is very important as an archaeologist. That has to be a constant companion. So you
Mhm.
need to know how to look at the past.
Okay,
Uh, by that I mean you need to be aware of how to look at the past and how you can talk about the past in a nuanced way.
okay,
So it's not just that everything we find or everything we see. What it means is that archaeological data, you need to understand, exists in the present. So we cannot, like through archaeological data, we cannot literally see the past. It's a detective work,
yeah,
and the way you analyze the data also depends on how you as a person approach the data, and you as a person and your idea of history, what your idea of history is. So that's why there are terrible debates about various things in archaeology, because different scholars approach it through different perspectives, and their trainings are in different schools. They have different political affiliations, and all of that comes into play when you are analyzing a little bit of data. So you have to cut through. You need to be aware of all of these biases that you may bring in the analysis with, and then you have to cut through the clutter and try to get the best analysis out of that. So if a medical profession, a medical person who trained in medicine wants to be a forensic archaeologist, that's definitely possible, but you need to be trained to analyze with that sense of history, which helps you bring that nuance in the study.
okay. Second question is about the landscape archaeology that we were talking about. So I don't remember the date exactly when, but I think Nalanda was also excavated completely, and it was just I think a few decades back by K.K. Mohammed sir. I think I don't know who exactly did that, but when Nalanda was I think excavated, and a lot of photographs which came up showing us perhaps the original structure of Nalanda. Is that also landscape uh, archaeology, or is it different from
So basically, landscape archaeology's job is to, me as a landscape archaeologist,
that? Uh-huh.
uh, our training is to try to read the landscape and try to find out where the sites may be located, and how like different variations in the landscape, both by looked at from the satellite as well as on ground, can help you identify where the old sites may be and how that site may be connected with other sites around the area. So
Mhm.
yeah, when Nalanda was discovered, before excavation, a big like in lead up to the excavation, you have to actually pinpoint the sites, places where you want to excavate, and that's where the landscape archaeology comes in. Basically, that's where the landscape specialists job comes in, that they try to understand where the sites may be and where it may be a good idea to do the excavation. And then after the excavation is done, a landscape archaeologist basically looks at that one site, so Nalanda for example, and tries to find out how, by looking at, now we have a lot of sophisticated satellite analysis that we can do, but looking at the landscape and studying and and trying to figure out how that site makes sense in its surrounding context and surrounding landscape. So what may be other connected sites, what could, and why a site is located in a place where it is. So reconstructing what was there, say in 1500 BC and stuff. Now it has become much easier with the satellite data and processing the satellite data. Earlier, you had to actually, if you could afford it, if your project had money, then you could actually take an aeroplane and do some uh, uh, aerial photography and try to figure that out. Or you just have to walk. You have to walk miles and miles and miles, but systematically. There is a system of walking as well to survey different parts, and that's what we do as a landscape archaeologist. So yes, Nalanda would have been discovered that way, and then but the job doesn't stop with the discovery or just the finish of completion of excavation. It goes on.
Okay. So I'm aware that you've also done excavations in Kerala, I think places like Kerala. Impal, Manipur as
Yeah.
well? I'm not sure about it. But would you like to tell us a little more about your excavations and or actually discoveries?
So Kerala was like where I excavated is a part of a big team, international team. Was a site. It's a controversial site, but it's a big port site that we were excavating in a place called Pattanam, which is very close to Kochi, and it is believed by that is the site of Muziris. Muziris was a port, and you also have Sethu's book on that as well. Um, so it's a port site from dating to at least, like, the oldest evidence found was from 6th century BC, but the activities really peak up from 3rd century BC and it continues to 4th, 5th century AD, where we keep on finding a lot of material culture, so pots and various commercial items from a lot of the places in the Middle East, so Oman, which is now Oman, and Saudi Arabia, and all of that, all of the area. A lot of products from Egypt, and also a lot of products directly coming from Rome as well. So we found a pendant which had a Roman god on it, carved in carnelian. So it's believed that that because one of the major sources of carnelian was Gujarat. It's that red stone. Um, so the carnelian might have been brought down from Gujarat and then carved by a stone carver there, and then it was probably sold to the Roman sailors who used to visit Muziris very frequently. So it was a very eclectic site with like multicultural site of like a site like a place like Bombay, but of the 3rd century BC, where there was a lot of trade going on and all of that. So one of the the focus of our excavation was to find evidences of how these various uh, people coming from all over the world, how they interacted with each other and all of that, and how they lived. And we were super excited in 2011 when I was digging there for the first year, and that was the 4th season, I think, in the excavation overall. We were really excited to find toilets, like actual toilets, which we don't generally find except for in big sites, big urban sites. And this site did not have much in terms of structural remains because probably the structures were made with more perishable things. But we did find a couple of toilets, which was interesting because the concept of having private, like accessibility to private toilets, tell you a lot about how the society worked, because that means it was it was highly stratified, and that was a luxury that was available to some people. And um, and these were also very much located in the top of the mound. So mound uh, is an archaeological feature. So you dig a mound because that's where layers and layers and layers of activity has been accumulated over centuries. So and it was found in the top of the mound meant that it was probably at the heart of the site at that time, heart of activities and all of that. So there were probably rich traders living there and all of that stuff. So that was one of our favorite finds. We also find a lot of, I mean, it's unbelievable, but in the weather like Kerala's is, where it rains quite a lot and the soil is acidic, we still found a lot of bones. And these bones were then genetically analyzed, and these bones and uh, the results that came back mostly from labs in the UK and the US is that these are bones of people coming from all over Middle East and all over the Greco-Roman world. So that actually made us really excited, because we knew that people were traveling here when travel was not that easy, and creating this multicultural atmosphere. So here the it's a classic example of where you can use genetic science to add more robustness to the archaeological data that you're finding. You're finding pots and all of that, but the bones can tell another, like give you another perspective to that as well. So that's Kerala, and it's a very big and very important site. I heard that they were going to resume the excavation this year, but unfortunately, it's COVID-19 happened, and it's not going on now. But it should be excavated even more. It will probably take it's going to be a lifetime's work of someone to complete the excavation. And the next big project that I did is my own PhD project, which was uh, in Telangana, near Hyderabad. There is a tiger reserve called Kawal Tiger Reserve, north of Hyderabad, and there we were trying to find sites where there are evidences of iron and steel production. Not that old in archaeological terms. It's only from the medieval period. But in the medieval period, that part in South India produced the best steel in the world, like one of the best steels. So we keep on hearing about Damascus steel, swords and all of that, and the legend of this magical swords and stuff in medieval European legends and also Islamic legends. So much of that steel was actually produced in Telangana and then uh, forged into swords in Persia, and then it was traveling to Europeans through the market in Damascus. So our job was to identify sites, like find sites, locate sites where these melting and steel making happened. And that's where my job as a landscape archaeologist kicked in, because that's where how you can actually, this is not excavation, you need to find out sites. And we found out more than 180 sites in and around this tiger reserve where uh, these swords were, like these steels were produced, which were the raw material for the sword. And then during my PhD, so these sites look very scattered, but taking a landscape approach by trying to reconstruct how it looked in the medieval period, you can actually see that these are all connected through like several shifting villages. So because the people were aware that they were using a lot of forest resources, and charcoal was the main product that they used to heat up the iron ore and all of that. So they were actually moving throughout these forests constantly. So this was not just one village that was making it, although it appeared that there were several villages making it at that time. It was a one small community which was making it, but they were going around for generations through the forest and passing on this knowledge from one generation to another, and creating this till the 1900s. But now, unfortunately, the knowledge is lost. I still was fortunate enough to meet like some people who were kids in the early 1900s. They are more than 90 years old now when I did the research. But they still remembered the last days of making of all of these things. So that also helped me to reconstruct the technology, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. So that I was so that sorry, I got a little tongue tied because my mind was working. Um, Basically,
Right.
it leads me to think that the concept of museums would have been a side effect or an outcome of archaeology. Because if you are talking about excavation, then it's it's that all of that is available in the museum, right? So museums is perhaps a side effect or an outcome of archaeology. So if archaeology wouldn't have been come, wouldn't have come up, perhaps wouldn't have museums today. But having said that, now you mentioned about these sites. Now, the site that you excavated or you found out in Telangana, and also the excavations, what actually happens to that after you actually excavate the artifacts and then the sites? What happens
To the artifacts.
to the artifacts as well as the sites? Like, how do you take care of these sites? Like,
So, so basically, if you are a well-funded project, you can have a multi-year grant to keep on excavating. For example, a very good example of this is the Hampi project, the Vijayanagar project, which has been running since 1970s, and it's still going on by several universities worldwide. So if you have that amount of interest and if you do find important stuff and you can create that kind of public awareness about the site so that you keep on getting funding, then basically every site can become a lifetime's work and you can actually maintain it, but like keep on going back and excavating it. But what happens to most of the sites, and because many of the sites are in like Pattanam, which are in densely populated villages or densely populated or near densely populated areas, so you cannot have like you cannot keep that site open for forever. First you have to think about like properly maintaining the site if you keep it open, and that's a lot of money. Plus people will probably like you probably started the excavation first by taking a lease of a land that someone owned, so you need to think about that person as well who owned the land originally. So what happens for most excavations which are not considered to be of the sites of huge importance is that you fill back the site in after recording it meticulously. You fill it in, fill it back in, and then you just close it up. That's the end of an excavation. So in Pattanam, for example, after every season, we had to close this. We have to close every trench up, and that means that you have an archaeological excavation is a destructive process. You're destroying the evidence as you're digging things out. So as you're filling it in, you have completely destroyed everything, and you have to meticulously that's why you have to meticulously record when you're digging, because you don't know what's going to happen afterwards most of the time. And once you fill it back in, you lose all the context, you lose all the layers, um, and you would probably end up seeing modern material at the very bottom, which should be the ancient layer, like old layers, right? So for most, that's the fate of most of the sites. If it's a big site like Vijayanagar and all of that, or if it's like the Indus Valley civilization sites, then you obviously have funding to maintain it and create a site museum. You keep the site open for tourists and all of that.
but
Yeah,
if you don't excavate, then you will never know.
yeah.
Oh,
You won't if you don't excavate, you'd never know. So that's why excavation is important. But excavation is again a destructive process. By that I mean you are when you are digging, you are actually taking the evidence from its context away. So that's why it's very important that every layer or every bit of evidence that you collect from a trench or an excavation area, you have to record it meticulously so that that record becomes, because that's the first time anyone is looking at that evidence. So that record therefore becomes the record for the future. So even if you have to fill in the site at the end, you still have that record. So even though you have destroyed the context, you still have that record.
oh. So how has this digital age made perhaps archaeological activity? How has this digital age helped archaeological activity? Like unlike the days when there was no internet or digital technology was still at its nascent stage, how is it different now? And how do you get these discoveries to public?
So that's a very good question. And archaeology actually is like technology is a very good friend of archaeology because archaeology always had to depend on technology because of the nature of the work. So in early days, whenever a new technology came up in terms of record that helps in recording, archaeology was generally the first one to adopt it in humanities. Uh, so currently, there is actually an academic discipline called digital archaeology, which trains students who are interested who are interested in the technological side of things, to help them innovate ways in which technology can become a part of archaeological interpretation and all of that stuff. And so there are several universities worldwide that offer this course. So it has become mainstream. For my work, for example, looking at satellites, and as the satellites kept on becoming better, as mapping became better, you get more and more and more data about the past, because everything that has happened to the earth in the past, it generally leaves a scar on the earth's surface. And our job as landscape archaeologists is to find out that scar through layers and layers of satellite data. So that helps. Then in terms of recording a site, there has been a lot of developments. Now you do not generally, yes, you record with a pen and paper, but also there are systems in which you can put the data in, and that can provide you predictive models, and that can provide you uh, like interpretative charts and all of that stuff. That came in archaeology from the 1970s. You can also have like various ways of photography, so 3D photography and all of that helps in archaeology to recreate an archaeological site, especially a monument and all of that. And that actually goes towards public outreach as well, because several museums uh, worldwide have started putting VRs, virtual reality or augmented reality stuff in their museums, where you can actually you can be in an archaeological trench, and you can dig the trench and find an evidence. You can actually look at the layers and all of that stuff. So that helps bringing archaeology more closer to the people. Like it becomes more easier to do outreach with. In terms of outreach, and I don't know, I mean, I'm very sorry to say, but in India, our archaeological excavations are sometimes very hushed up. Like, oh, let's not talk about this uh, before we publish, because there is a race to publication, and there is a fear that if you put pictures and all of that, people will somehow get to interpret the data and beat you to the publication, all of that stuff. But uh, worldwide, it has become a trend now to reach out to people, because it's very important to make people aware about what you are doing. And also it's our collective past, so make people aware about our like collective past through social media. So there are generally archaeology teams worldwide have social media pages dedicated to the research, and they constantly keep on the outreach going with the general community by using social media, which is a very powerful tool in this case. But also you have to be aware of what social media information to believe and what not to believe. So that's something that's again a gray area that we need to figure out. But yeah, technology is playing and will play a huge role in archaeology in the future. And I think if you want to really innovate in the future, and if you want to study archaeology, then do think about the technological aspect, because that's going to be a big player in how the discipline is organized, and it's how it's done in the coming years.
Okay. So the last question now: three sentences for anyone who wants to be an archaeologist in the future.
That's okay. I, the basic ones would be you need to read quite a lot and read widely. So if you are interested in doing archaeology, then don't just read what is in the syllabus or what's taught in the class, because reading as widely as you can and taking a critical look at history and the past actually helps quite a lot. So that's the first one. So read wherever you can, as much as you can, in whichever way you can. The second one is you need to be innovative. So it's not just that if you want to do archaeology, it's not just not does not mean that you have to work for the ASI or you have to go and become a professor. You can do a lot more with those, with the skills that you learn. So keep an open mind, and for and you can uh, like think about like what else you can do with the skills, and that adds to the employability as well. So keep an open mind and innovating constantly in your head, and also in the way you study the past is very important. And that's where archaeological technology is going to play a huge role in innovation in the future. Um, and the number three, and that's most important, it's very mundane, but the most important thing is be observant, see how societies, like how human interactions work even in the present. Because if you're not observant, if you don't know, like if you don't have that patience to observe, uh, you would probably not get much out of an archaeological data. And archaeological work is very close to the work done by a detective, but it's just that you are trying to find out something which is several thousand years probably back in time. So you don't have witnesses to ask. So that makes your job even more challenging. So being observant and questioning everything that you see is very important. So yeah, those would be my 3 pointers. It's very vague, but I think it's very, like, these are the three things that you need uh, to be ready with.
I'm sure that's a lot of food for thought for all of us. Thank you for that insightful session. Even I learned a lot from
Thank
this
you very
session
much.
just by actually conducting this interview. I'm sure everybody has learned a lot. But as every Bengali child might know, an archaeologist is an Kuttanashi to the to the highest order. As you just
Yes.
mentioned, because of the difficulty of actually putting the dots together without actually having any witnesses for it.
Yeah.
I'm sure this is this will be something which excites another generation of students and children. And I'm sure people in India will also start taking this much more seriously and documenting and actually save our heritage and understand our
Yeah.
heritage. I'm sure more generations, even our generation, will perhaps do a lot more with the knowledge and understanding of what we have. Thank you very much for the brilliant session, and I hope to stay in touch, and we will perhaps do more such sessions and perhaps on
Thank you. It
different
was
conversations.
pleasure. Yeah. Thank you. Take care. Bye.